You shouldn't have listened.
The streetlight across from my driveway died, but only for me. Cars passed through it and their headlights dimmed. Every other pole glowed warm yellow, perfect rhythm. Only mine stayed dead, a black hole in a sea of gold. At first, I thought it was a burned-out bulb. My name is Ronan. It was a little after 11:30 p.m. The house was quiet, just the refrigerator hum filling the room. I looked out my window and saw it, the entire street washed in that familiar amber glow, except the pole right across from my driveway. It wasn't just dark, it was absent. A perfect circle of nothing, carved out of light. I told myself it was a city issue. Bulbs die, transformers fail. I'd call it in tomorrow. No reason to let a shadow make me nervous. The next night it was still out. I called the utility line. The woman on the other end was calm, almost rehearsed. She said a repair crew would handle it by morning. I hung up, looked outside. Same pattern. Every house in the row glowing amber, except mine. My house was a hole in the map. 2 more nights. The darkness never shifted, not even with the wind. It stayed perfectly round. Too round. Like geometry, not chance. I pulled the city records. The maintenance log said that exact pole was serviced 3 days ago. Replaced, verified, closed ticket. That standing there in my window, I could see it. Still dead, still feeding the same black void. I started to feel chosen, not special, selected. When a neighbor drove by, their headlights dimmed, just for a second, as they passed through that circle. Like the light was being swallowed. Once the car cleared my property line, the beams flared back to normal. That's when I stopped calling it darkness. It was something occupying the dark. I went out with a flashlight. The air felt heavier inside that circle, like humidity without the heat. The beam hit the pole and flattened. No reflection, no metal gleam, just a dull skin absorbing light. Then I heard it. A faint, dry scraping from inside the hollow post. At the time, the paint was worn away in a ring. Tiny etched grooves ran around it, repeating circles within circles, faint but deliberate, like someone carving a symbol that kept correcting itself. The cold climbed through the soles of my shoes. I stepped back, beam shaking slightly. From my porch, the other streetlights looked alive, breathing gently in their rhythm. Mine stayed still, a blind spot that refused to blink. And it started affecting more than light. My phone brightness dropped when I stood in the driveway. My smartwatch froze at 11:33. The refrigerator inside paused for exactly 1 second, then hummed louder, compensating for something. By the 4th night even, my reflection in the window was darker. My face looked tinted, like the void had learned my outline and was trying it on. I don't think the bulb ever died. I think the darkness was installed there, like a lock. A perfect circle keeping something in. And standing in that ring of silence, with the hum gone and the air still, I finally understood what was wrong. It wasn't the light that failed. The light was being kept out. I was never the one looking into the dark. The dark was the one looking out. Through me. Then faint metal scraping fades in again. I started to feel like a lab rat in a perfectly controlled experiment. The darkness wasn't random anymore. It was architecture. A cage. and I was the thing inside being measured. The light poles became the bars. Every hum of electricity sounded like static behind a two-way mirror. The horror wasn't about a dead bulb anymore. It was about whatever was deliberately keeping it dead. The question looped endlessly. Was this some twisted reflection of my paranoia? Or was the space around my house being programmed that way, cordoned off by an external intelligence? A surveillance test zone disguised as ordinary infrastructure. I started cataloging the pattern. Cars would cast clean shadows that ended exactly at my property line, a razor-straight edge where light refused to cross. The darkness wasn't absorbing illumination, it was bending it around itself. Every boundary was precise, measurable, engineered. I needed proof. I called Mark, my old friend in city planning, told him everything. He laughed first, then sighed the way someone does before agreeing to humor your madness. I asked him to check the grid, the streetlight wiring for my block. He said he'd look. A week crawled by. Then, his email arrived. Subject line, "You need to see this." Attached was a diagram of the electrical layout. Every block was clean parallel circuits, except mine. Mine had a separate line, a single feed running 2 blocks east directly into a non-municipal junction box that wasn't supposed to exist. A dead-end connection that bypassed the city grid entirely. It was real. It wasn't my mind. Someone had written me into the blueprint. I called him. His voice was wrong, hushed, breathy. "Ronan, what's going on? That junction, it's not in the system. It's a ghost circuit. I can't even open the record now. It's gone." Then silence. I grabbed my keys, still half on the call, and drove 2 blocks east. The map said the junction should be behind a chain link fence in an empty lot. What I found was nothing. Just knee-high weeds moving in a wind that wasn't there. No box, no conduit, no trench. I stepped into the grass. Static filled the air, faint but directional, like a pressure behind my ears. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The sound cut clean. The night felt hollowed out as if something had been unplugged. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the empty lot and the way my headlights didn't quite reach the back fence. For a second, I thought maybe I had reached the end of the maze. Maybe the experiment was complete. Then I drove home. As I turned onto my street, I saw it before I even parked. The light across from my driveway, the one that had been dead for weeks, was on. Not yellow, not warm, but searing white blue. The kind of light that hurts. It cut sharp surgical shadows across the pavement, carving my yard into strips of silver and black. The beam wasn't aimed downward anymore, it was tilted directly toward my window. I stepped out of the car, hand over my eyes. Under the glare, the asphalt looked wet, reflecting not the pole, not the houses, but the silhouette of a man standing beneath it. Still, upright, watching me. I blinked once, he vanished, but the shadow stayed. Perfectly vertical, perfectly centered, still pointing at me through that blinding blue. I could feel heat on my face, though the air was cold. And in that glare, I realized what the darkness had been doing all along. It wasn't just isolating me. It was calibrating, waiting for the replacement signal. The light wasn't fixed, it was switched. And I was no longer inside the cage. I was the thing the light was calling home. Rather the street outside hasn't gone dark since. But the rest of the block says their lights flicker every night at 11:33. Only mine stays perfect. Cold. Blue.
I ran inside, slamming the deadbolt, heartbeat crashing against my ribs. Through the peephole I saw it, the figure still standing under that blue-white glare. Tall, thin, completely smooth. No face, no edges, just a silhouette carved out of light. It didn't move at first. Then, slowly, it raised one arm. In its hand, a small black box, shiny, no markings, cables trailing like veins. It knelt at the base of the pole, and with deliberate precision, it plugged something in. The blue-white light snapped off. The entire street collapsed into absolute, suffocating black. Not nighttime black, vacuum black. No reflections, no depth, no sound. Just the feeling of air folding in. I froze at the peephole. Nothing. Not even after images. The dark had erased itself. Then came the sound. A soft, dry scrape. Not from the pole, from inside my walls. It moved slow, circling, as if the house was exhaling me. I didn't think. I ran. Back door, keys, engine. I drove. No plan, just away. Headlights didn't cut the road, they felt absorbed. I didn't look back until the first hint of dawn broke the horizon and painted the world yellow again. That ordinary color felt holy. I pulled into a rest stop, shaking so hard the wheel rattled. In that cheap sunlight, everything looked harmless. Asphalt, coffee, people. But I knew what I'd seen. The blue light wasn't restoration. It was activation. That figure didn't fix the pole, it synced it. My house hadn't been darkened. It had been isolated for monitoring. A controlled field. I was the variable. And when he plugged in the box, the feed went live. Now, I hear it everywhere. The hum. A soft, perfect tone buried under every silence. Inside walls that don't belong to me. In motel vents. Behind static on cheap TVs. I move every few weeks. No windows, no lamps. No light strong enough to cast a shadow. Still, the sound follows. When I close my eyes, I can almost feel it vibrating in my molars. A low electronic murmur like a distant server farm idling just for me. Maybe it's a surveillance system. Maybe it's military. Maybe it's something else entirely. Mapping perception through fear. Whatever it is, it's still running. The light that was meant to protect me was a lie. The darkness was the firewall. And I think when he plugged that box in, he wasn't turning my street back on. He was turning me on. I've become the circuit. The signal is inside now. Every breath, every heartbeat, every blink. Data. I am not being watched anymore. I am broadcasting. And every night, just before sleep, when the hum sharpens and the air thins, I catch a flicker of cold blue light behind my eyelids, like someone testing the connection. I keep wondering what happens when the hum finally stops.